All right, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Shelby Smith. I'm a staff attorney and pro bono coordinator here at Legal Aid Services of Oregon. One of my primary projects is our expungement clinic, which I understand a lot of you are interested in volunteering at this upcoming clinic, April 19th. So thanks very much for attending this training on the procedures for our clinic. There is also another training that we have recorded on expungement nuts and bolts, and a training that was recorded at the beginning of 2022 after the law substantially changed around expungement. So if you get a chance, I highly recommend that you watch those recorded trainings before attending a clinic. And this training will be a little bit shorter, and I will apply for CLE credit for it. But this is just, I'm just going to go through the procedures that will happen during the clinic, so that you all kind of have a better idea of what to expect when you attend. As I go through things, if you have questions, feel free to just shout them out. I probably won't be looking at the chat, but it looks like, I don't know, most of you are not in a position to jump into the chat. So, but feel free to interrupt me at any time and just shout out your question. So let me share my screen. We'll go over kind of some of the forms also that will be in use during the clinic. All right, can you all see my screen? You should see like a PDF that says, yes. Okay, great. So we use, there's, I hope that you all have a chance to, like I said, review that training and look at the actual statute. The statute that we are primarily looking at when working with folks on expungement is ORS 137.225. But to kind of go along with the training and the actual statute, we have a cheat sheet that we've put together that I hope that you'll all be able to review, and I'll have printed copies of this available for everyone at the clinic. But it kind of just helps you kind of keep in mind what someone's eligibility might be when they come to the clinic. But to kind of back up, the clinics typically start at 10 a.m. I ask that all of the attorney volunteers get to the clinic at 9:30 so that we can just go over any last minute things that have come up, updates in procedures at the different county courthouses, ways they may be accepting or processing motions to set aside or expungements, and kind of talk about the files in general, clients we may be seeing, things like that. So try to arrive at 9:30 or shortly thereafter, just so we can kind of get everyone together and talk about those sort of things. Next, what will happen is the clients will start to arrive around 10 o'clock. They'll be scheduled at intervals of 10, 11, and noon, because the clinic will go from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. When clients arrive, they'll be checked in, and then they'll be assigned to an attorney. If they arrive very early, say like they're assigned, an 11 a.m. appointment, but they get there at 10:45, what we might do is have them do fingerprints first. So typically the order is they're assigned to an attorney, you work with them on their case, potentially preparing motions for them, and then they do fingerprints with us afterwards. Fingerprints are required for a background check in order for their motions to set aside to be processed and expungements to be granted. So we do both things at the clinic, the attorney-client meetings and then the fingerprints. So if clients get there early, they might do that process a little backwards, but typically, they'll get assigned to one of you. or a pair of you, if you feel more comfortable working with a buddy at the clinic your first time. And then you'll head over to your assigned meeting room with the client, where you'll have that client specific file. In that file, the first thing you're going to do is go over a brief service retainer agreement that with that client. The retainer agreement, the purpose of that is to kind of really spell out that, you know, you're not being retained for full representation throughout, you know, their expungement process. You're just assisting them that day. So both, you know, the attorney will fill in their name, client's name, and then you'll really spell out the purpose of the representation. So, you know, in this case, you would just on that line write, you know, expungement or motion to set aside. And then go over with the client the scope of the representation. So I emailed all of these documents to Sarah ahead of time. Sarah, if you can share them with everybody else, that'll just give everyone kind of a chance to look over this retainer agreement in detail, but you'll go over it with the client. Client will initial the services. You'll check off services to be provided. The client will initial that they understand the scope of the representation, and that, you know, they won't be charged for services, that representation terminates at the close of the clinic, goes over confidentiality so that the client and you both understand that the attorney-client confidentiality applies. It'll talk about, you know, the nature of the services, and that they give permission for you to discuss their case with Legal Aid Services of Oregon, despite your, you know, attorney-client relationship. And then the client will sign and you will sign. But we just ask that you make sure you go over that retainer agreement in detail with the client before getting into the analysis with the client. So after that, after you go over that with the client, you'll get into preparing a motion to set aside if appropriate. So we prepare the client's file for you. And I'm sorry I don't have an example of this because you'll see it at the time, but we pull the court records for the client's cases that are potentially eligible for expungement. And I say potentially eligible because you won't, you know, we don't do the full analysis ahead of time. We do a brief analysis of what may be eligible in their criminal records. But that's, you know, the purpose of you meeting with them at the clinic is kind of to determine that full eligibility. So we'll print out the case records from the Oregon e-court system. And then, you know, we use a system called Record Sponge that will kind of give us brief information on whether they may or may not be eligible for expungement of certain cases or certain criminal records. Then based on, you know, your interview with the client, your review of the statute as it applies to their court records, if you determine that they're eligible for expungement, then you will fill out this form motion to set aside. And so, you know, you'll enter the county, you know, they could have cases in Multnomah County or Clackamas County, or but they also might have cases from outside of those counties. So you just want to pay special attention to the county that the case, you know, is filed in. And then put that at the top. You'll put, you know, the parties, which plaintiff is almost always going to be the state of Oregon. There's a rare case where it's not, and that's if say someone was arrested, but nothing was ever filed, then in that case, to have an arrest set aside, the client in that case would be the plaintiff and the defendant would be the district attorney or the, it would be the district attorney, excuse me, for that specific county. And then, you know, you'll go through, fill out the form, list whether it was a conviction, record of arrest with no charges filed, like I just mentioned. And then there's cases where charges were actually filed, but then for whatever reason it was dismissed or acquitted. There's also contempt of court findings. We don't often see those come through due to our specific eligibility with our clinic, but you might have one of those. And then rarely you'll have a guilty except for insanity that you'll check off. And then, you're going to want to go through this motion form with the client and explain their eligibility, and that they're making a declaration. So this is a motion and declaration all in one form. And then, if they were convicted, if it's not, you're not filling this out for an arrest or dismissal, you'll check off the specific eligibility, whether it's felony class B, felony class C, misdemeanor, A or B or C, or a violation. And then, explain to the client, that they're making a declaration. So these are their statements. I fully completed or complied with and performed all the terms of my sentence, et cetera. Or, if it's not a conviction, this is the section where you would fill out the information on the record of arrest, the arresting agency, why they're eligible. And then typically on the portion where about fingerprints, you're going to check the box that's will send, since we're doing the fingerprints for the clients at the clinic. And we actually pay for their background check with the Oregon State Police through legal aid. It takes a little bit longer for us to get those checks for the client. So you're going to just always check the will send box, because it's not going to typically happen before they file this paperwork. And then they're going to sign it. And the certificate of mailing can be done that day, because we'll assist them with mailing those records, or talking to them about, if they're in Clackamas County, they can just walk up the street and file those that very day. Any questions about that motion to set aside form?
Yeah, Shelby, the right where it says case number, is that like blank for the ultimate? Is that in reference to the original case, or is that like is this like a separate case to set aside? No. Case?
Yeah, good question. So this is their case number, the criminal case number. So this gets filed if they've been convicted or charges were filed that were dismissed. We're going to have you use that case number that was initially assigned to that criminal case. So this motion will get filed into that case. It's not a new case. The difference or the caveat to that is if there was an arrest but no charges were ever filed, so there's nothing in the court records, then you're not going to put a case number in there because there isn't one. So they would go and file that, as the plaintiff. Like I said, that's a rare case where the client would be the plaintiff, and the district attorney would be the defendant. When they file that with the court to have that record of arrest set aside, the court will assign a case number at that time. So that's the only point where you wouldn't have a case number to put in that box. But that's a great question. And I will be at the clinic. So if any of these questions come up, as we're at the clinic, feel free to come check in with me too. So as I mentioned, some clients, as you're meeting with them and going through their records, you'll determine they're not eligible either now or ever. Usually it's just a time issue or a timing issue where they may not be eligible now, but they will be in, say, like a year or something. And the reason we don't always know that ahead of time is because the program that we use to do that brief analysis to find out whether they may be eligible doesn't take account of if someone was incarcerated and the length of that incarceration. So someone's eligible for expungement based on either the date of conviction or release from incarceration. So that's something that you will, in reviewing the court records and in conversation with the client, determine their eligibility from that date, whether it was the date of conviction or the date of release from incarceration. So if they're not eligible at the time you meet with them, and it may be that they're eligible on some cases, but not others, because most of the clients will have more than one criminal case they're hoping to set aside, you would also fill out this exit instruction and eligibility for expungement. Go over that with the client, and then hopefully put down the date that you believe that they will be eligible for expungement later on. And they can always come back to our clinic at that later date once they are eligible, and then, you know, have assistance filling out those motions and what have you at that time. So, and then if you give the client any additional advice, you know, you would just write that in below. Questions about that?
Is there a separate motion for each conviction that you're trying to get expunged?
So not each conviction. So because there might be multiple convictions per case, but there's you're going to file or draft a separate motion for each case. So and then I'm going to go back up so we can talk about that too. On a lot of criminal cases, someone might have either multiple convictions, or they might have a conviction and then other charges that were dismissed. And so if you're or filling out the motion for a specific case and say they have one conviction and they have two other charges that were dismissed, you would check the box for conviction. And then you would also check the box for record of citation or charge that was dismissed or acquitted, because they're gonna want everything on that case that's eligible, expunged from their record. So not just like a specific charge that they were convicted on. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. Yeah, so, and like I said, you're gonna fill out a motion for each case that may be eligible for expungement. Not one for each charge on a case. All right. So after you've either, filled out the motion to set aside or talked with the client about their ineligibility at that point, then you'll just fill out this Oregon State Police form. That just, is going to be basic information so that the Oregon State Police can, along with that fingerprint card that we're going to help them with, process their background check. And so the main thing to keep in mind with this is checking in with the client to find out if they've had any aliases or other names that they've gone by. And that can even be cases where, say, the arresting agency got their name wrong. It could be just like a slight misspelling or things like that, but it's helpful to get those, in the boxes, so that when doing the background check, the Oregon State Police has all those names. And then you're also going to want to make sure, if they say had cases in Multnomah County or Washington County or Clackamas County, you're going to put each county in the boxes that they're seeking a set aside from. So that's the basics of this form. And then, you'll just check the fingerprint card form and the box for fee for set aside or conviction, because we're going to pay that $33 fee for the clients. I just provided the instructions here for you all to review. You don't have to go over that with the client. It's just a helpful little bit of information. And then after they're done, you're done with all the motion to set aside form, ineligibility, next steps, and the Oregon State Police form. You're just going to go over this next steps guide that we have, and you'll give this to the client at the end of your consultation with them, so that they have the information about what to do next. And so they can either, I'll say where it says file your motion with the court, that gives instructions on how to do that. They can do that themselves. Some clients, like I said, since this clinic coming up is in Clackamas County at the Clackamas Law Library, the court is it's on the same block, but just up the street. And so some clients will choose to take their motions at that time and just walk them up the street and get them filed with the court that day. Otherwise, we also will provide them with mailing envelopes that we at Legal Aid can take and mail for them, or they can choose to go mail themselves. And, that would be in cases where, they've got maybe, case in Yamhill County or, further away counties where they don't want to go and, file those in person. Talks about mailing their packet with their fingerprints to the Oregon State Police. That's another thing we're also willing to do for them. So, but, just go over this next steps sheet with them. And so again, I encourage you all to just review it ahead of time so you know that what you're going to be talking with the client about. And like I said, you'll send them with that paperwork. The last piece on that I think is helpful to go over with clients is that not just because their record may be set aside and sealed or expunged in the court records and with the arresting agency, not all private companies that provide background checks update their records very regularly. So, it could be that they apply for employment and they've gotten their record expunged, but for some reason that employer uses some sort of private company that provides background checks, hasn't updated their records, and so it still will show that they have this record of conviction. There is an organization called the Foundation for Continuing Justice that they can work with to try and make sure that their records get cleared from all of those other places it might be out there floating around. So I always encourage you to just go over that information with clients so that they can, once their records have been sealed, just make sure that, it's not floating out there for someone else to, potentially deny them employment or housing or things like that, because that's, those old records are out there. And then after you've done all that with the client, you will then walk them out to me and my assistant who will be there for their fingerprints. And then we make them copies of, all of their paperwork, and again, go over with filing and things like that. But that's kind of the gist of the procedures at the clinic. And then, after you've checked them back in with us, you'll get assigned another client and go through the whole process again. Any questions about all of that? I know it's a lot of information, and I go over a lot of these things at the clinic at the beginning too. We'll talk about, what's in the files and things like that. I see Darley's hand.
Hi, Shelby. I just want to confirm for the service on the DA and some of the other things, that is something the clinic is willing to do for them in terms of like the mailings and doing all of that stuff.
Yes.
That is something the clinic is willing to do for them.
Yes, absolutely. So we, at the time they check out with, us, we will provide them copies of everything. So copies for their records, the copies to serve the DA with. And then if they choose, we will help them. We will do that for them. So we'll do that mailing. And if you talk with them about that and they choose to have legal aid help them with that, in that certificate of mailing, you would just put that down as, that it's me specifically. You'd put my name in there, and when you bring them out to me, let me know that they want to have me do that mailing, and then I will sign that certificate of mailing and do that very day.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Any other questions?
How long do you normally take with one of these? I mean, 20 minutes, half an hour? What's it?
It depends on how many records someone has. So typically we say it'll be about a 45-minute consultation altogether. It could take less than that, and it could take more, because some clients may have like one or two records that they're hoping to have set aside. Other clients might have 5 or 10. And so, you know, obviously those are going to take a little bit longer, because it's going to take longer for you to do the analysis, for you to fill out the motions and things like that. And I give you a heads up before I assign a client, you know, about how many records they have. So keep in mind that it might be a much longer consultation. So you might see, you know, only 2 clients instead of 3. But typically each appointment should only take 45 minutes to an hour at the most. Other questions?
Shelby, for your
Yeah.
like planning purposes, like, do you need to know how many of us are gonna be there and that kind of thing? Because
Yes.
unfortunately, there's been one thing got scheduled, so some of us are gonna have a little bit of a conflict. So I just wanted to see about kind of logistics and when you need to know like a firm number of how much of us are gonna show up.
So it would be helpful to have a firm number by, I would say, Monday or Tuesday next week, so the 15th or 16th, because there are also some attorneys from Intel that are interested in joining this clinic too. So, you know, if you only have a few folks that are able to join this time around, I will supplement with however many folks that they have, but I've kind of got them on the wait list right now. So as soon as you can let me know, that would be wonderful. That also kind of helps us with scheduling the clients for that day. One thing I forgot to mention is a few days before the clinic, what I'll do is send out a list of the client names and dates of birth so that you can do a conflict check. I doubt that you all will have conflicts due to the nature of your work, but I send those out to all of our attorney volunteers just in case you need to run that conflict check and make sure that you're good to go being paired with a client. But I really mostly only see that with attorneys that are in private practice. But that's just part of the procedures ahead of the clinic.
Shelby, we have 2 paralegals that are also going to attend with us. Is there a way for them to have access to the training? Do they just sign up? Because it says attorney resources, but will you guys approve them as well for that? Or how should we? Should they go through my account?
Don't, but if you think that they will regularly join you for, you know, say this is not just a one-off thing, you'll attend other clinics in the future. Yeah, just give me a heads up their names and we can probably approve that. I know we've recently kind of adjusted the way that form works when you register to only allow folks that are Oregon State Bar licensed attorneys to jump in, but I think we must have a way around that because we do have our summer law clerks register for an account also, and they obviously don't have bar numbers. So yeah, just give me a heads up on who they are, their names, signing up, and I'll try to make sure we get those approved.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions today?
When we need to be approved by, or when I haven't read any.
Oh, so
Materials.
go to there's a link, a pro bono, I think it says that, but it's in the email. So click on that. And then it will say like attorney resources, and you'll want to access that, but it won't let you until you register. You're going to register an account, and then it usually takes up to 2 days for you to get approved. Once you're approved, then you can access all the training.
And we need to do that at least 2 days before the.
Yeah. Or
3 days. Good.
So yeah, I would encourage you to register for an account. If you can today, it takes like 2 minutes maybe to register for an account. that'll get sent to our tech person who reviews registrations on the website, and then you'll be approved for that account on ProBonoOregon.org.
And one tip too, it's through YouTube, I believe, the recording, and you can speed up the recording to like a 1.5. So it's just a little tip.
And all of those trainings are approved for Oregon State Bar CLE credit. So the information is on the site. You'll just go to your transcript and you can add that to your
I'll slow it
transcript.
down.
Justice, what are we?
What's the category?
Yeah.
This is general. Is it, what's the category?
that?
Is it general for CLEs?
Oh, I believe, and I need to look on the website, but I believe that the expungement is the most recent, like the nuts and bolts training is a practical skills credit, but I am not positive. I think it is. Some of the trainings are access to justice credits. So we try not to do the general just the general CLE credits, but I think most of ours are either practical skills or access to justice credits. Okay.
Thanks so much. I think we'll probably maybe by the end of the week be able to get you a solid number
Okay.
for your planning purposes. So thanks so much for the training for setting this up. So
And send everybody the documents you should have received.
Well,
Sarah, if we could do that now, maybe we could use the time we have on the calendar for the remainder of the meeting to set up our accounts.
Idea too.
Oh, yeah.
that is a great idea. I will apply for CLE credit for this specific procedures training. It'll probably only be 0.5, but I'll apply for that as practical skills credit too. And then I'll send you all that information to, if you either watched live here with me or if somebody watches the recorded training, which I'll be happy to send you, you can apply for the CLE credit once that comes through.
Do you need a list of attendees today? You want me to send you that?
If you want to send me that, I can just directly input your information once that's approved, or, I can just send you the information on the, event ID and you can input that yourselves too. So either way.
Thanks, Shelby.
Yeah,
We
happy to
appreciate
join you all.
you.
Looking forward to meeting most of you, or some of you at least, at the clinic on the 19th. And feel free to email me if you have questions leading up to the clinic. My email address is Shelby, SHELBY.Smith@lasoregon.org. All right. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.